But yeah, I mean, once they get the loan, there's something out there that, talking about paying back the loan, and
Yep.
that's called an amortization schedule. Now, some people may not know what that actually is, and that's something I'd like to touch on just because I don't think people only fully understand when they're paying the mortgage, what they're paying for, and how it kind of breaks
Yep.
down. And that's and the loan type, it just depends on the
Right.
loan type as well. So let's talk about what amortization schedules are, and then kind of break down a couple different loan types and kind of explain what that looks like.
Yeah, so amortization schedule, it can be a fun word to say sometimes. So essentially that just, when you get a mortgage, there is a chart and it's going to say, hey, when you're making your payment, X amount of money is going toward interest and X amount of money is going toward principal. Now, what is funny about these charts, okay? The principal and interest, the total of it is going to remain the same, but what goes toward principal and interest, as you make more payments, it's an inverse relationship. All right. So as you make more payments, more money is going to go to principal. So this is how every loan type works. So whether it's a student loan, whether it is an unsecured loan or it's an auto loan, the interest on it is front loaded. Okay. Meaning that more money is going to go toward interest on the early payments versus later payments in there. So an amortization schedule is simply how many payments you're going to make until your loan is paid off. Okay. In the mortgage world, I would say probably 80% of the time people are going with something called a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. So what that means is that there's 360 payments there. So there's 12 months in a year, 12 times 30, that's 360 payments. All right. Can be mind blowing to look at. But if you look at that amortization chart, as time goes on, more and more money is going toward principal and more money is going toward, less money is going toward interest. So what that means for you is that balance, every time you're making a payment, more money is going to knock down your principal balance, so you owe less on that mortgage. Now, a common question that I get on my end of it about an amortization schedule is, number one, the people ask me like, hey, do I have to really make all of these payments? Do I have to pay all this interest and everything else? No, you don't. Okay. What the amortization schedule is showing you is that if you make the minimum payment for 360 payments to 30 years, this is how long it's going to take you to pay off this mortgage or how much interest you're going to pay. Okay. You can pay above and beyond your minimum payment for your mortgage and you'll pay less interest over time. So that chart is just saying, hey, here's a worst case scenario. If you, the bare bones, you make that minimum payment. Okay. Couple things that people don't know. The average person is in the same mortgage for 6 years. And then the average person typically switches homes every 7 years. Okay. So that means that people typically refinance every 5 to 6 years when they have a property. And then also people sell and buy homes. So you're rarely, and I mean, not saying never, but rarely are you going to have the same mortgage for the entire term of it for 30 years. People typically refinance to get down to a 20 or a 15 to get a lower rate, whatever the case may be. So there's something called, it's TIP, a total interest paid, that freaks people out all the time on the disclosures that we see. And that number basically says, hey, here's the amount of interest you're going to pay in a percentage if you pay this loan dollar for dollar over the life of it. People always freak out about that number because it looks like it's a lot of interest. But I'm like, I always tell people, you're going to pay this off early. Like, you're not going to have the same mortgage for your entire life. And even if you make $5 above your monthly mortgage payment, that's going to go a long way as far as paying less interest. Okay. The end all be all what an amortization schedule is just how many payments you're scheduled to make, not how many payments that you have to make on that mortgage or you're required to make. It's just a bare minimum worst case scenario. Okay.
Yeah, and I think the big thing with that is the front loading of the interest. I know a lot of people come to me and say, "Hey, I paid $1,000 towards my payment, but I still owe not more. I owe 300 more than that or whatever," because that principal is not actually going down; it's going towards the interest. And I don't think people fully understand, like, most of the money that you're spending up front at the beginning of your mortgage is actually going towards the interest rate versus the principal. And I feel like that's lost on some people sometimes.
Yeah. People sometimes think it's a scam. Well, people, and that's the thing about it, like, what people don't know about that is that that's how all loans are set up, again, from everything. But in my world, in the mortgage world, things tend to be a little bit more regulated because of what happened in the financial crash of 2008. that all that stuff is broken down. So it's more money. Typically, when you buy a house, it's going to be one of the largest investments that you're going to make in your lifetime. So there's more details that go into it, but that does freak people out as well. It's like, oh, I made this payment, but only this went to the principal and then everything else went to interest, right? And the reason why whoever made, amortization schedules up, they wanted to make sure that, hey, I'm giving you all this money. I want to make sure that I'm making some investment back up front in addition to that principal, because I'm lending you money. So that money I'm lending out to you, I can use it to invest it somewhere else, but I need to be compensated because I invested in you. So I want some interest up front versus getting all my money on the back end of it. Again, that's how all loans are structured, but it tends to be more noticeable for your mortgage because that's the largest payment that most people have on a month-to-month basis. So that's why it's can be scary for some folks too. But it end all be all, just chip away at the payments. Everything will take care of itself with it. Don't let it be scary for you. But there's nothing we can do as a lender, okay? And people think sometimes on the lending side of it is that money's going into my pocket or somebody else's pocket. That's not how it is, okay? So as a loan officer, I get all your financing ready to go. When you actually make those payments, you're making payments to a servicer. So that may be the company I work for. It may be a credit union. It may be another bank, but that is the person that's servicing or taking the payments for your loan. So I don't make any more or less money off of your payments. That's not how it works out. But again, how loans are structured, all loans, is that everything's front loaded in interest, and it's the inverse relationship, more and more payments that you do make.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, this is a question for me. Now, there's such a thing as
Yeah.
an interest-only loan, correct? Where you're only paying the interest?
Yeah,
How's
that is
that?
correct. Yep. So those can be called negative amortization loans or interest-only loans. So how that works, you typically see that more either on home equity line of credit or jumbo loans. All right. So how that works out is that loan product will allow you to pay interest only, so typically a lower monthly payment, but the balance that you take out, that principal, it never moves if you don't make any payment above and beyond that interest only payment. Okay. So who would do an interest only mortgage? Well, it will be a person that may be an investor or somebody that is looking to say, hey, you know what? I'm not going to be in this property for a long time, so I want the lowest payment. And I think this property is going to appreciate, so I want to cash out while keeping my monthly expenses pretty low. All right. So it's not for everybody, but what an interest only loan is essentially, let's say that Alex, I give you $1 million. And then for that $1
I like
million,
that.
the interest on it, yeah, you love it, right? And so, so I expect you to pay me back, let's just say in 5 years, right? But you have to pay me interest every single month. And that minimum interest amount, let's just call it $5,000, okay? So you pay me $5,000, and then at the end of that 5-year period, I expect you to pay me $1 million, all right? So that's what interest only typically is that $1 million that I gave you up front, if you only pay me that interest for the next 5 years, you still owe me $1 million on the back end. So in that time frame, what people are betting on sometimes is, again, that home's appreciating or the value is going up, where they can flip that home and make a profit, pay off that mortgage, and not have a lot of money paid out of pocket. So that's not something that it's not maybe the best fit for everybody, typically for more investors, but it is something that is out there. But it's really cool for home equity line of credits, right? So I'm doing a ton of home equity line of credits right now, or second liens on mortgages, because everybody has so much equity in their home at this time, and they can use that money to build a deck or do landscaping or consolidate debt. There's various options you can do with it, and it can be just interest only. You can pay that back. So it keeps your payment down pretty low, and you can pay that principal balance back as you see fit over a period of time, okay? The interest only, it just doesn't move your principal balance if you're just making that minimum interest only payment for that period of time.
Yeah. Yeah, like you said, it takes a special situation to have a loan like that. So most people are going with
Right.
the normal amortization schedule on that.
Yep.
So, awesome.